Hi, how's it going? Thank you all for coming here tonight. If you carry Mike and Ike's cut in thirds, you might be a behavior analyst. If you get excited when you see a graph, you might be a behavior analyst. If you've eaten the last 10 meals in your car, you might be a behavior analyst. Hi, it's Mike. I was going to make a video today about how I read journal articles, but my roommate told me it was already done. So thought maybe I'd break down an article instead. So the article I'm going to break down for you today is Increasing the Vocal Responses of Children with Autism and Developmental Disabilities Using Manual Sign Man Training and Prompt Delay. The authors are Vincent Carbone, Emily Sweeney-Kerwin, Vivian Attanasio, and Tamara Kasper. It was printed in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. The year was 2010. The issue was 43. Page numbers were 705 to 709. If you want to follow along, you want to print that out, you want to find that article yourself, you can go along with me and do it. So again, I'm going to go through the method described by my roommate, and I'm going to start with the discussion section. The intro, I would read the intro first if I was going to read it like a story, trying to get information, trying to do it for entertainment purposes. But when you're trying to work with a client, or you're trying to help a client reach some kind of goal, or you're trying to reach a goal for yourself, you don't want to read a paper and find out that you wasted 10, 20, 30 minutes reading this paper. And if you're really going to digest a paper, it's going to take you a while. So you want to know, you want to be able to make quick decisions. Is this paper right for me? So what do? However you find your articles, it's usually a search bar. You start typing in keywords or things that you're looking for. Then you read an abstract. That's how we all start out. I don't really have anything better than doing that. But then once you print out the article, you're like, abstract looks good. I'm going to print out the article or read it on your tablet or whatever kids do these days. You can go through it fairly quickly, and it should really only take you 5, maybe 10 minutes to find out if it's a good article. So, yeah, hope you enjoy. So I stated earlier, I'm going to start with the discussion section. I think that, to me, is the most important part of knowing if you should read the article or not. The discussion section is where the authors are going to brag about what they did. They're going to say, look at my accomplishments. They're not going to add numbers. They're not going to add in results. They're not going to add things. They're like, we did this. Like, we increased vocal responding. We increased teeth brushing. This is what we did. So you read the discussion and you find out, what did they do? And if you don't want to do that, there's no point in even reading the article. Like, that's not what you're trying to do. That's not your goal. So next. So what happens? So you get this paper. Well, the results and discussion are one section here. I mean, it's only a 4-page article, so I'm not too surprised that they condensed it. Parsimony, not bad. I actually really like it with journal articles. So, but you still got to be technological. Can't get rid of that characteristic. So, results and discussions are together here. So what do we got? Oh, here's the key sentence. The finding of this study support the conclusion that prompt delay and vocal prompting can be implemented with manual sign language to produce an increase in vocal responses in children with developmental disabilities who emit few vocal responses. And then it says some stuff it doesn't support, it says some stuff it might support. It says it kind of goes along with some PECS research. So, awesome. Is that what we want to do? Do we want to increase vocal responding? Yes, that is what I was looking for with this client. Awesome. Check. Now where do we go? Results section. So I always read the text before the graphs. Not always. Sometimes I get excited. I love graphs, so go to the graphs first. But this one, so say figure 1 displays the effects of the intervention on the number of responses. There's 3 participants, and they each increased with vocal responding. Showed that Tony's mean responding increased threefold in unprompted vocal responding, and that both Ralph and Nick, their manual signs were accompanied by very few vocal responses during baseline, but demonstrated substantial increase in unprompted vocalizations during treatment. Tony benefited more, and they hypothesized this is due to having a more complex pre-baseline vocal repertoire coming into the study. So that means they all improved. Nick and Ralph improved a little bit, and it sounds like Tony improved a lot. But they think Tony also had more of a vocal repertoire coming into the study than the other two did, and so maybe it's like an exponential growth. I don't know, so that sounds good though. There's 3 participants, 3 increased with vocal responding. That's good. But now, got to go to the graphs and see if you can trust them. You don't trust people. You got bad vocal displays, not vocal displays. You have bad visual displays. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I can write that me saying hello means cowabunga, but that doesn't make it true. That's not empirical evidence. So how we get our empirical evidence? Through visual displays. So I just read their description of their visual displays. Now I'm going to verify it. I'm actually going to look for myself. So any good graph should tell you everything on its own. So here on the y-axis, first off, just looking at it's multiple baseline across participants, just from the look of the design. Absolutely, it has to be multiple participants across baseline. The y-axes are all 0 to 50, so that's good. Good charting conventions. Got some good tick marks in the right place. We got axis labels. Y-axis, frequency of manual sign mands accompanied by prompted and unprompted vocal responses per session. Okay, that makes sense. And then the bottom we have sessions. Well, I guess, so frequency of manual signs. To me, and every other science besides behavior analysis, I guess really just ABA, because the rest of behavior analysis does it, but frequency means a count per time. I know the only time for me that it doesn't count as count per time is if I'm taking the exam. But even if you think, like, what's your radio waves? That's 96.1. Why is it 96.1? Because that's how many times, that's the count of the waves going up and down in a given amount of time. Microwaves, any kind of waves, radio waves, X-rays, those are rays. Radio wave, X-ray, waves and rays. I don't know the difference between waves and rays, to be honest with you, but I bet it's a count per time. I bet they call that frequency, just like every other science besides us on the exam. So I use frequency as a count per time. I usually say that though. Here they use frequency as a count. Just one of my pet peeves. It's not as technical. If you gave this to any other scientist besides someone who sat for the board exam or the BACB exam, they would look at frequency and go, this isn't a frequency, that's a count. Yeah, I know. Some reason they're the same. I actually have the article on why they're the same, and we'll break that down someday. So, sessions. I also have a problem with sessions. So, when you see sessions, you don't know the time period between sessions. So did session 1 and session 2 happen on the same day? Did session 1 and session 2 happen consecutive days? Did session 1 and session 2 both happen on a Monday? Did session 1 and session 2 happen on the first of the month? You don't know. You don't know the difference in sessions. So sometimes I've seen graphs where there's like a dramatic, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. The behavior just dipped. Well, between that session and that session, there was summer break, and they went on a cruise and stayed at grandma's house and got spoiled. Absolutely, they lost their skills over summer break. If you're not playing, that's what happened to me. I remember the first month of school, always just like, oh, I forgot we have to do this. So yeah, I don't know why I keep looking for a graph, but So you might see that. So if you actually use days, you can see that there'd be a big gap in between this session and that session, and that would account for why there's a change in the data. You won't see that on your graph if you're using sessions. Looks like the y-axis to x-axis is good. I don't know, I'm not going to measure them. Looks good enough. So figure 1, the frequency of manual signs accompanied by prompted and unprompted vocal responses per session. Okay, I mean, that pretty much says what the y-axis is. So, all right, so baseline, steady state, steady state, steady state. Looking good. We got dots, unprompted, prompted. Prompted what? Prompt delay and vocal prompt. Frequency of manual sign mands accompanied by prompted and unprompted vocal responses per session. So they're vocal and the vocal response. So prompted and unprompted vocal responses. So let's hear in baseline for Tony, anywhere between like 3 and 17, probably with like a 10 level. And then we have, well, so in baseline they did not, looks like they did not prompt, or at least they didn't measure vocal prompts, but the vocal prompts are at a higher level than baseline unprompted. But you can see unprompted responses, boom, they went up. I don't know what the level is. I mean, they said it was like tenfold or threefold. I'd say it's like 38. I'd put the level at like 30, maybe 35. So like from 10 to 35 unprompted vocal responses, absolutely, sign me up. Sounds great, love those results. Next participant, Ralph. We got here, looks like, I mean, level's gonna be like 1, maybe 1, a lot of zeros, a high of 3, maybe 4. Not really sure. And then prompted vocal responses, boom, bunch of those. Put the level, again, like 33 maybe, so a lot. But we don't know what it was in baseline, so that's not our dependent variable. I actually feel like that's the independent variable. So, and then what's our dependent variable? Unprompted vocal responses. We got a low, like a low of 3. So our low is close to our high, and then the high is, it's like 28. So from a high of 3 vocal responses during baseline to a high of 28 vocal responses during intervention with probably a level of like 17. Or a mean level of 17. It's awesome. Absolutely amazing. Yes, absolutely. Participant 1, check. Participant 2, check. Participant 3, what do we got here? We get a little bit higher top, a bunch of zeros for unprompted vocal responding in baseline. Looks like we have a few that may go to 6. 1, 2, 3. Looks like we got 3 6 sessions. Maybe a 5 or a 4, like 2 5 or 4s. So we did have some sessions with some unprompted vocal responding, more than our last participant. But it's still a lot of zeros. And then we go into intervention, and we see a rhythmic incline of prompted. A rhythmic incline of prompted responses, but unprompted vocalizations did not occur. They're straight zeros. Yeah, for Nick, there was 0 unprompted vocal responses. Bunch of prompted vocal responses. Continued to go up. I wouldn't even want to call a level there. I had to guess, I'd say like a level of 12. But what, didn't they say Nick demonstrated substantial increase in unprompted vocalizations during treatment? Wait, unprompted vocalizations. Unprompted vocalizations are at 0. There was actually occurrences of them, like up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least 5 sessions with at least 4. Okay, so this is why you gotta verify it. This is why you can't just read a results section and say, oh, they did it. You can't just read a discussion session and say, oh, they did it. No, you got to go and you got to verify. So there's a lot of things right with this study, but that's one wrong thing. I would like to think that they just mistyped it or messed up, or it was I don't think anyone was trying to get by on anyone. I think if any of these authors that was brought to their attention, I think they'd be like, oh my goodness, let's fix it. But I don't understand how it made it past the journal editors. It made it past everyone. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 authors. There's, I don't know how many journal editors. I don't know how many people have read this, and it made it to print. But there's typos all over the place. But that's why you verify. You need to verify. You got to look at stuff for yourself. I had philosophical doubt. Turned out it was warranted. I don't want to say they lie, but they have a false statement in the results section. So, I mean, it doesn't make them look as good, but to me, it doesn't take away from the study that much, because the other two participants worked really well. And with that participant who had 0 unprompted, had pretty good high rates of, or not high rates, but it's accelerating. Well, it's not acceleration chart, but it's improving. I don't know how much. I'd have to do a lot of math to find out, what exactly the rate of improvement is. But I don't know. We got vocal responding. It's prompted vocal responding. But doing this, we can get vocal responding. So now you know kind of what's the benefit. We can get vocal responding. Might not work. Didn't work with one individual. We did get other type of responding. So it's kind of like, this is where you got to use a clinical judgment. You got to say, is this paper worth using or not? Honestly, first time I read it, I didn't catch that. I didn't go through the results section as detailed as I probably should. Part of it was I had to write the paper for class, whether I used it or not. But absolutely, there's 0 prompted. So, well, that's it for that results section. So for me personally, I'd read this article and I'd make a decision about my client. Which participant is my client most like? Do I think my client could benefit from this? And really, to know that, you need to go through the methods section. So that's where we're heading. If you have 15 puzzles and none of them have all the pieces, you might be a behavior analyst. If you've ever taught math on a trampoline, you might be a behavior analyst. If you've ever been thirsty and had to turn down a bottle of water, you might be a behavior analyst. All right, so the methods section is where you're going to write your programs from. This is where it's going to teach you the step-by-steps. If it's written technological, you should be able to take any journal article, read the methods section, and replicate it. That's what being technological is. Writing things in a way that anyone else who's versed in the field can pick that up and say, oh, I could do that. That makes sense. Shouldn't really have questions about, well, in that instance, what would you do when that happens? They didn't write it down. So really, in order to replicate science, which is a big part of making sure that we have good science, is you need to be able to replicate experiments. In order to replicate experiments, you need to have technological methods. So let's break down their methods, see if we can replicate them. So it starts with the participants and settings. So also a big note here, here's where you look for ethics. Nothing before this there could be any ethical concerns as far as I see, outside of, lying and doing things like, oh, well, that's just a blatant lie in your article. That's unethical. I don't think anything unethical has happened in this paper so far. But here you might read the methods section and just say, like, I can't do that to an individual. I consider that mean. That's unethical. Don't do it. If you think something's wrong, don't do it. It doesn't matter what the results say. It doesn't matter what accomplished. If it's wrong, if it's unethical, don't do it. So the methods section, that's one thing you got to think about. That's really when you're doing anything in the field. Pretty much if you're doing anything any day, you should think, is this ethical? The answer is no, don't do it. But you got to have that moment. You got to attack that private event. Is this ethical? And answer it. So that's the number one thing I try to do here. Is it ethical? Number two, I'm trying to see, can I replicate this? And also, are the participants in the study resemblance of my the participants I'm working with in any way. So the study was conducted with a 4-year-old who is diagnosed with autism. They use the pronoun he, so I assume he identifies as a male. He could man for 15 items using manual signs without prompts. They had Ralph, a 4-year-old boy diagnosed with Down syndrome, also identifies as male as they use the he pronoun. He manned for 10 items with no prompts. And then Nick was a 6-year-old boy diagnosed with autism, also identifies as male. We have 3 males here. You can always use the he pronoun. And said he had a weak manual sign repertoire and required physical prompts, or full physical prompts. Okay, so probably the weakest of the repertoires. And if you remember from our results section, Nick is the one that didn't have any unprompted vocal responding during intervention. So response definition, this is just where you come up with your operational definition of what's going on. So the dependent variable measured, it's really nice that it spit it out for you, is prompted and unprompted vocal responses. Okay, including speech, approximations, and forms. Speech sounds. So anything, I think you can go ah, and it works. You just got to make a noise. You make a noise, that's considered vocal responding, and that's what they're tracking, whether that's prompted or unprompted. Okay. Recording. They used a data sheet to record stuff. They took inter-observer agreement. That's where you just have 2 independent observers measure the same thing at the same time. They did that for 30% of all sessions, and the average or the mean agreement was 99%. So 99% of those times on average they agreed, with a range of 96 to 100. So in doing science, this is important because you can't just say, hey, this happened. No, it's more believable if you can say, well, I think this happened, and then that person watched it, and they also said the same thing happened, and we didn't even talk to each other about it. Okay, well, now it's more believable that it happened. Just because you even have 100% agreement doesn't mean that that's actually what happened. Philosophical doubt. You gotta use philosophical doubt everywhere, all the time. That's how you get good science. So multiple baseline across participants. Yep, we knew that because we looked at the graphs already. So the general procedure. So it looks like sessions were twice a day. So that answers our question about the graphs with sessions. I was like, were sessions done multiple days, across days, multiple weeks? They had different items arranged in random order. So I was trying to look here. It doesn't say, so they had 2 sessions per day, but they didn't say, was it 25 days in a row to do the study? Like you came 25 days in a row, were there breaks? Did you take the weekend off? Did you come in 25 Mondays in a row and did 2 sessions a day? There's a lot of questions there. Don't know how often they happened. So Mike just had a not yet moment. He misspoke and kind of made a mistake just like the authors did in the results section. He meant to say there were 50 trials per session, 2 sessions a day, so 100 trials a day, and there was a total of 42 sessions, which he gathered from reading the graphs, looking at the x-axes of the graphs. So, I know. So it looks like, so they took an item, if I'm reading this right, instructor would hold up an item, and then if the participant declared motivation is what they're calling it, and they're defining that as looked at or reached for. So if the participant looked at or reached for the item, they would say that motivation is declared. And then they would hold it there for 5 seconds. If a manual sign, which is just like sign language or modified sign language, something of that sort. If a manual sign for that item was made within 5 seconds of holding it up, they got the item. If the item was not manually signed it for, or a wrong sign was given. So you named it for water, but it was a teddy bear. They then gave a gestural prompt and then waited 2 seconds. If the gestural prompt did not work, they provided a physical prompt and then delivered reinforcement. Reinforcement being, if you've declared motivation for an item, that item being presented should reinforce whatever behaviors occurred prior to the presentation of that reinforcer. So essentially, showing that you're motivated to get that item's going to serve as a reinforcer. So in this, as soon as if you either made the manual sign or followed the gestural prompt to make the manual sign, or then was physically guided to make the manual sign at the end of as soon as the manual sign was made, you're given the item. If there was if they showed no motivation for the item, they just moved it aside and grabbed the next item. And so they only worked with items that where motivation was shown. Okay. I think that's what that said. So during this time, they did not reinforce speech sounds or any sound made. So in practice, you wouldn't do that, but for a study to show if their intervention worked, yeah, that would confound the study. And then you could say, like, well, for that one learner, it would probably be more beneficial for those responses to be consequated with reinforcement. Absolutely. Then we wouldn't have this article and we couldn't disseminate it and replicate it and use it with our clients. So that's the difference between being a practitioner and being a scientist. A scientist is trying to determine things about the world. A practitioner is trying to use those things that are determined to help individuals. So as them being a scientist under this capacity, they weren't there to help those individuals. They were there to find out or to determine if this intervention works, and if so, then let's use it with a bunch of individuals. But just because the article says don't reinforce vocal responding during baseline, doesn't mean you shouldn't reinforce vocal responding during baseline. Because I know with my clients, if they don't communicate vocally and then they start, I don't really care what's going on. I don't really care what I've written down in a book. I don't really care what the programs or procedures are. As long as it's ethical, as long as it's safe, as long as we're not doing any harm, absolutely going to reinforce that with the dentist schedule that I could. So, so during baseline, baseline was pretty much that procedure I just said. Except when they presented the item, they would say the name of the item. So they would go through that, hold it up for 5 seconds, gestural prompt, physical prompt, give them the item with the name. So looks like their intervention, very similar. So what they do with the intervention is they showed motivation for the item. Then they did a 5-second prompt delay occurred. If any sound was vocally emitted during this time, boom, given the item. If there was no vocal sounds made during the 5 seconds, then they waited 2 seconds and provided a vocal prompt. And they did this 3 times. So it's, all right, do you want this item? Oh, I'm showing that I want the item. All right, you want the item. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Water. 1, 2, water. 1, 2, water. And if any time during any of that process, any noise was made out of their mouth, boom, you're just giving water right away. It's yours. It's your water. You made vocal responding. And if no vocal responses happened, by the end of that 3rd vocal prompt, you were also given the water. Yep, after 3 vocal prompts, they're also given the water. And that takes us to the results section. So we pretty much digest this whole article. If you own 4 copies of Candyland, you might be a behavior analyst. If on your free time you collect data, you might be a behavior analyst. If you have Skinner memorabilia in your office, you might be a behavior analyst. Thank you. Good night. So, honestly, trying to decipher the article, but now thinking about it conceptually and systematically, how genius was that? How low tech, how easy this would be. You're using items in the individual's lifestyle. You're just holding it up and providing different prompts. We provide prompts all the time. But the part that I think is really genius here is one, they made the client or the participant show motivation. Boom, that's a good sign. If you're not motivated for something, you're not going to ask for it. So boom, they had to show motivation for it. And then during intervention, since they've been working on manual signs, you don't want to lose the manual signs. We want to gain vocal responding, but we also don't want to lose the manual sign. Let's say you never learned how to say water, but you have a sign for water. We don't want you to lose that. We'll attempt to teach you how to say water because there's more opportunities to ask for water using vocal responding than it is to ask for water using manual signs. So it'll increase the likelihood of contacting reinforcement in the future if you can learn how to ask for water vocally. But if you can only ask for it using your hands or whatever method reliably works, do it. We don't want to lose that. So what did they do in this study? They didn't put the manual signs on extinction. So if you're sitting there, you're doing the prompt, and the kid's like, water, like, say water. 1, 2, water. The kid's just sitting there, manual signing. If you never give that water, you just put that manual sign on extinction. They might lose that sign. Now they used to have a way to ask for water. No more way to ask for water. So what did they do at the end of 5, 8, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, probably 12 or 13 seconds. They showed the thing, you showed motivation. As soon as you showed motivation for it, no matter what, about 12 seconds later, that item is being delivered to you. So boom, you're not going to lose the manual sign. But they also took advantage of matching law. Not really took advantage of matching law, just used it for the participant's benefit. If you have a motivation to get something, well, one, you're going to say response effort. Is it easier to use manual sign or is it easier to talk? I don't really know. I'm going to assume that most individuals that have the ability to talk. Those who don't come up with some other way of communication, but it seems to be the preferred way across our species is to use vocal, and then if you can't, or if you refuse to for some other way, to come up with an alternative. But it always seems like that's the top. So I would have to imagine has a lower response effort. I can see that's less tiring. If this whole video I had my hands up here moving, they'd probably be tired by now. My jaw's a little bit tired, my throat's getting a little rough, but not as much as probably holding my hands up for the whole time. So that was really genius. So using low response effort, and they also used delay, the immediacy of reinforcement. So they used the immediacy that as soon as you emitted a sign in the beginning, boom, you're given the item. Next condition, or intervention condition, as soon as any vocal response was emitted, boom, reinforcement, the immediacy. We didn't wait. We don't have to wait for 2 seconds. We don't got to wait for this. Boom. And so if you're truly super, super motivated to get something, you'll do whatever it takes to get it faster, delayed discounting. So this wasn't a greater thing or a smaller thing like most delayed discountings are, but it's like, would you want something now or do you want something later? The response is always now. I want it now. If I can get it faster, if I can get it sooner, I'll take it now if I'm motivated for it now. So if you're really, truly motivated now, just make any vocal response reinforcement. Make any vocal response reinforcement. And I think through that, you can really shape up some vocal responding. I would love to see an extension of this. That would be amazing. That's pretty much it for the results section. That's or the method section, excuse me. And sounds doable, sounds replicable. Sounds like I could go do this on a trampoline. Sounds like I can do this in a basement. Sounds like I can do this in a moving vehicle. Sounds like I can do this at the mall. Probably wouldn't want to do it at the mall, but I could. So the reason I point that out is this a good article? Well, one, I don't like that they use frequency as a count. Not a big fan of that. Just a pet peeve of mine. You do what you want. Not a big fan that they use sessions. Not a big fan of that. Also not a big fan that they were incorrect in the results section for one of the participants. Not a big fan of that. So things like, oh, is that enough to hate the section article? Actually, no, I've been using this for like 5 years now. It's an amazing article. Can't tell you the programs I've used. It's great. It's great. Even with the misinformation in the results section, that participant still had benefits, still had prompted responding. How awesome would it be to just increase prompted responding? That's the step to getting to unprompted. If you have no vocalizations, you can get some prompted vocalizations, fade those prompts away, now we got vocalization. This is a good place to start with that. I'd also love to see what happens after, if this reliably happens, can you then shape those vocal responses? So at first it's just any sound. Like, all right, here's water. All right, here's a teddy bear. All right, here's a Skittle. Here's whatever. Yes, any sound seemed to result in whatever the motivated thing was for. What about if you had to start, if you wanted water, you got to make any sound in water. Like a wah, 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 or anything, any sound in water. And then can you shape that up, slowly shape that up? And eventually you got someone who would not even make a sound for water, now asking for water. Is that possible? It's been 10 years since the article came out. Someone do an extension out there, you got thesis, someone's got to do a thesis. Really low tech, really easy. I mean, they wrote the whole article in 5 pages. 4 pages. 4 pages, not even 5. Didn't even need 5 pages. So, and then if you needed more information, or if it wasn't clear, if you're just like, oh, where did they get this idea from? Or let's say they're like, hey, we use some other procedures. Here's the procedures we used. You go to the intro, you find out, you read about them. So, yeah, just from a glance, they talk about some things, about prompt delay procedures that have already been used before. They talk about manual signs. They talk about combining 2 types of verbal behavior together. In this case, vocal and manual signs. They say the results have been steady, so their purpose is to replicate findings, but also teach a alternative communication while using manual sign. And they did that. It worked. I'll tell you what, it works really well. So that's it. That's the article. Let me know what you think. Got questions? Got thoughts? Let me know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all the button, everything. Just don't forget to do all that stuff. Somehow it helps. I don't really know. So, yep. Stay safe during these times. Have a good one.